iniciamos una versión especial de Te Escucho Las Vegas con la doctora Mónica Roca por esta su radio por internet, Magiclatinosvegas.org, la otra cara de Sin City, desde Las Vegas, Nevada, para el mundo. Y hoy una edición especial, día lunes y a las 10 de la mañana, porque tenemos a alguien muy especial, con un candor muy especial, que es demócrata y que hoy nuestro querido amigo Carlos Eduardo nos va a oficiar de alguna manera de traductor y después se va a subtitular en el YouTube en español para que todas puedan verlo, escucharlo y que no haya tantas interrupciones. Gracias, Carlos Eduardo, por esto.
No problema. Welcome, Marianne. Thank you so much for coming here. This is the first community radio, Hispanic community radio in Las Vegas. It's been, an honor to meet Monica. She's been doing this for years, and she has quite a following, and everywhere in Nevada. So
explícale que es la única radio que se presentó en sociedad por un canal de televisión como Univisión, el día que hace de esto 16 años atrás.
Yes. So this station has been supported by Univision, and even Telemundo has talked to this radio. It's such an honor with working with Monica. So we should start, right? Okay, so the questions that we have, I'm gonna let you talk as much as you can, and yes, I'm gonna translate right now, so people that's actually listening know what we're talking about. So le voy a hacer las preguntas a Marianne. La primera, so first, who is Marianne Williamson, and why do you want to be the next president of the United States?
I'm an American woman. I was born in Houston, Texas in 1952, which makes me 71 years old. I've had a 40-year career as a writer. I've written about spiritual topics, universal spiritual themes that are at the heart of all the great religious teachings, spiritual traditions of the world. And I have founded nonprofit charitable organizations. And my work has put me into direct contact with a lot of people who were going through very bad times in their lives. It might have been critical illness, such as cancer or AIDS. It might have been learning that your child is addicted to drugs. It might have been learning that your spouse is leaving you and you didn't even know there was a problem. But what I learned, that career has been over 40 years. And what I learned in those first 20 years, my experience was that people going through hard times, for the most part in this country, that time of crisis was an exception. It was not the rule. And what I began to experience around the year 2000 was how many people I met for whom a period of crisis seemed to be the rule rather than the exception. And I realized it wasn't because of those things that just happen, like you get a diagnosis of cancer. It was what is essentially bad public policy. People who didn't have health care. People who had to work more than one job, sometimes 2 or 3, even 4 jobs. People who are afraid to send their kids to school, the quality of their schools. And I realized simply spiritual counseling, all these things as important as they are, the issues of taking accountability, the issues of personal transformation, all of that is important. Even charity and nonprofit organizations with which I've been so involved, those are very important, but they cannot compensate for the fact that the society itself has become so economically unjust. That is when I began to be interested. I was always interested in supporting candidates. I was always an activist to some extent, but it was when I recognized that fundamental change in our society that I knew it was time for people who are not part of that system to step in now, because the political establishment enables and perpetuates that economic injustice, and it's time for the people to step in.
La voy a interrumpir. Nos está viendo Luis Elche Fredes desde Utah. Nos está viendo el pastor Isaac Umeana, que tiene una cantidad de seguidores. Nos están viendo desde Italia, nos están viendo desde Alemania nos están viendo desde Brasil. No
Awesome.
voy a hablar de todo porque si no seguimos acá en cosas.
Yeah, so a pastor from Utah that's very, very popular. He's right now connected and he's commenting. And he has a big following. And someone else from Atlanta. Yeah, so big personalities. I'm glad. Okay, so voy a traducir. I'm
Okay.
gonna translate what you just said. So Marianne Williamson es una persona, tiene 71 años. Ella
Un año más chica que yo.
Sí. 1 year older than her. She's 72.
That means we're wise and we have things to say.
Yes, exactly. So, ella empezó en el mundo en su mundo como conferencista y coach espiritual, y donde ahí se dio cuenta que en este mundo del coaching espiritual, que había un problema que era más esencial en este país, que es el problema económico y el político de Estados Unidos, y eso es lo que estaba enfermando a la gente, porque hay una parte espiritual que hay que trabajar, pero si tenemos un sistema que está destruyendo la economía de las personas, entonces las personas se estresan, se sienten mal, tienen que trabajar 1, 2, 3 o 4 trabajos a veces para sobrevivir. Entonces este estrés los tienen a un punto que ya los enferma. Entonces ahí es donde se dio cuenta que ella podía dar algo más a la sociedad, y por eso decidió lanzarse como presidente de los Estados Unidos.
Exacto, Humana dice, sería lo mejor que se viera acá en los Estados Unidos porque las mujeres son más guerreras que en todas las áreas y se necesitan más representantes como estas mujeres guerreras.
Awesome. Okay, there's a person on the radio saying that we need a woman on the power, because that's what we need, warrior women in the power.
Okay.
Perfection. Okay, so second questions. By the way, these questions were created by Jesse Ellen and Monica. So what do you think is the primary issue in the U.S. that needs urgent attention as a national emergency and must be addressed at its core?
Part of the problem is that we are living at a time when everything is a crisis. There's actually a book out there now called Perma-Crisis. So we're always playing whack-a-mole. Today it's an urgent environmental crisis. It's an urgent educational crisis. It's an urgent gun safety crisis. It's an urgent health crisis. Everything is an urgent crisis. We need to stand back and recognize how the vast majority of these crises have a common root. And that is a rigged economic system by which profits for huge corporate entities is put before the safety, health, and well-being of the American people. Our environmental crisis is because of the institutional greed of big oil. Much of our health crisis is because of the institutional greed of pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies and even big food companies that put so much carcinogens in our food. We are always in a crisis having to do with some military situation because of the institutional crisis of big defense contractors. We are at a crisis with gun safety because of the institutional greed of big gun manufacturers and so forth. The deeper crisis is that our government now enables those forces because the corporate money from those industries exert so much power in Washington that our government has become a system of legalized bribery. So where our government should be bottom line advocating for the safety, health, well-being of the American people, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, too often our government is serving its own donors more than its constituents. That is the deepest crisis. And the only way to override that at this point is for we the people to step in with a revolution at the ballot box.
Yes. Wow. Okay. So, la pregunta era, ¿cuál es el principal problema que tienen los Estados Unidos en este momento? Y ella dice que el principal problema es que el gobierno de los Estados Unidos está trabajando para las corporaciones. Porque hay crisis de guerra, crisis alimenticia, crisis educacional, crisis en esto, crisis en aquello. Entonces al final vienen las corporaciones a poner las medicinas para curar, supuestamente vienen las corporaciones a poner las armas para la guerra, y entonces todo este dinero se lo pasan al gobierno, y el gobierno obviamente le va a dar siempre prioridad a las corporaciones primero que a las personas. Entonces este es el problema que ella ve que es el principal en los Estados Unidos, y es que el que hay que atacar, darle el poder de vuelta al pueblo. Perfect, Marianne, awesome. So,
El tema de los homeless y el tema de la salud mental
yes,
y
I
el tema
got
de
it.
las armas.
See, so an essential issue for the Latino community is immigration. What would you do to address the challenges at the border with immigrants?
One of the reasons I think I would be a very good president is because I believe that I would help America look in the mirror. First of all, let's go back. We have to deal with the fact that for the last 50 years, probably more, American foreign policy related to Latin America helped to actually destabilize these economies. And the destabilization of these economies is a large part of the reason why there is such economic despair driving people away from their homes trying to come to the United States. Secondly, a lot of that destabilization that American foreign policy has created continues into the present, particularly in the form of the sanctions on Venezuela and Cuba. I think the average American does not necessarily recognize how violent these sanctions are. Their purpose is to get at the quote-unquote bad guys, but they rarely do, because the powerful quote-unquote bad guys have bank accounts in Switzerland or cryptocurrency or whatever. It is the average citizen in these countries who suffer. So how ironic is it that because of American sanctions in places such as Venezuela and Cuba, we then help foster the despair that drives many people to our own southern border. Secondly, of course, we have to deal with the drug cartels, because once again, the despair that people are running from has to do with reaction to the horrifying violence that is due to the presence of these drug cartels. We can help undercut the market, the black market, on which these drug cartels thrive by beginning to decriminalize drugs, beginning to regulate, decriminalize, and ultimately legalize drugs. That won't get rid of everything, but it will definitely help with the problem. Now, then it comes to what is actually happening at the border. I was in Eagle Pass, Texas a few weeks ago. 150 years ago, it was keep out the Jews, keep out the Irish, and keep out the Polish. There's nothing different. Today, it's keep out the Latinos, right? This is racism turned into political force. I think of Governor Greg Abbott of Texas, joined and enabled by such governors as Ron DeSantis. These are racist cops. That is what these people are. I saw the concertina wire. I saw it with my own eyes. I saw the buoys. It's important to realize 1,500 people drowned in the Rio Grande River last year alone. 800 had drowned already this year. These are people whose despair was so great that they are willing to walk across the Darien Gap, which is, I'm sure you realize, is one of the most inhospitable pieces of land on the planet. They are walking across the Darien Gap with little children, and they get to the Rio Grande, they get finally to the border, and some of them drown. So if I'm made president, people who were so traumatized that they made such a difficult trip here will not be re-traumatized at the US border. Let me make it very clear. It is not impossible for us to create the appropriate processing centers. I saw it there at the border at Eagle Pass, where local officials and community leaders were pointing out to me, we could have a processing center right here. Why do we have the Texas Guard right here? We could have a processing center right here. It is not impossible. This is a political issue, and Congress not having done its job. The officials at Eagle Pass told me, this has stayed with me. He said, we feel oppressed by the Texas government, by the state government, and we feel abandoned by the federal government. All this talk about how Kamala Harris was going down there, and it's not a difficult trip to go down there. And also, when you go down there, you talk to the people who live there. People have been crossing the Texas-Mexico border for centuries. I grew up there. This is what. So people who live there know the cultures, know the people, and know what to do. The state government doesn't listen to them. The federal government doesn't listen to them. The state government is overriding federal jurisdiction. On the other hand, the federal government plays along because the federal government is afraid of doing what really needs to be done. And that is that we create a counter narrative to the racism of those who are claiming that this is such a crisis at the border. The crisis is the humanitarian border for these people. Let's look at some facts. If an immigrant to the United States who has claimed asylum, and we must consider asylum sacrosanct. I understand that there are people trying to game the system, and of course that should not be allowed, but not at the sacrifice of the asylum principle. Okay, if the facts are, if you help an immigrant get on their feet, just help them get on their feet, within 1 year, the majority are self-sufficient. And then if you look at the overall picture of immigrants in the United States, these people contribute. And certainly the Latino, this is a very entrepreneurial, these are just facts. And we need to proclaim them rather than almost whisper them. This is what we need to proclaim. This is a population that contributes to the economy. It does not suck from it, including all of these people who are living in the shadows as undocumented workers, who are contributing. The crime here is on the part of the U.S. government. It's a moral crime. These people are being forced into the shadows, and it's only getting worse. It's only getting worse. The Texas government is proceeding with the most draconian policies, scaring people, traumatizing people. I always say, unless you were descended from an enslaved person who was brought here from Africa, or indigenous Native Americans whose people go back probably thousands of years on this continent, who do we think we are? My grandparents came through Ellis Island. My grandfather, one of my grandfathers had to come back 3 times before they would let him in. But they found a life here. This country gave them a life. And they had the people today should be accorded that same right. That is the bigger problem we have. Now, one other thing I'd like to say. There are those that are concerned now, particularly with what's going on in other places in the world, that there could be a security danger for the United States. I am not minimizing that. And that should be and can be handled. If you're just looking at crime in general, however, far more crime is committed by people who were born here than by people who come here. And we have the means and we have the resources to protect this country at the border.
Voy a interrumpir. Decirle que esos caramelitos son para la tos. Okay. Y mientras leo esto, el pastor Isaac Humana dice: tienen más dinero en guerras que en el pueblo. Beatriz Gutiérrez Valleza dice: el sistema económico debería replantearse. Existen 2 líneas alternativas de economía: The Sacred Economy, propuesta por Charles Einstein, y The Caring Economy, propuesta por Ryan Eisler. Después Rosemary Flores, que es una activista, dice: Do you support the Dignity Act? Elena García nos está viendo. Sí, la ley de dignidad que se está pasando para que los indocumentados, los inmigrantes, puedan después de 4 años legalizarse acá y le den permiso de trabajo. Se llama la ley de dignidad.
Do you support the dignity law that they're it's a new law that they're
se pasó la propuesta al Senado.
Okay.
y es
Is it
conjuntamente
called Dignity?
se llama Dignity Act y que está y es tanto los demócratas como los republicanos están tratando de que salga eso.
Okay. Yeah. So
Para que se puedan legalizar las personas que están dentro del país desde hace 4 años, pero que tienen un récord impecable.
Okay.
Que no tienen...
Are you familiar with that Dignity Act that she's talking about? Maybe, well, I don't know if...
Dice Dignity Act Bill, Bipartisan Bill, dice Rosemary Flores.
Maybe find their correct name. Maybe tiene otro nombre.
Just Google it.
Yeah, or Google it.
'Cause I don't know.
Yeah, so
Okay.
she will know. Ella lo va a saber.
Decile del caramelito.
Ah, this is for coughing.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. If you want more. So,
Sorry.
básicamente el problema de inmigración que ella siente que es un problema meramente político, porque ellos lo que quieren es verse como fuertes, como que ellos tienen el control de la frontera. Y I'm translating everything that she said while I'm trying.
Pero en todas las campañas de los presidentes anteriores prometen que va a salir y de la vez que suben se olvidaron.
Sí, entonces ella cree que lo que está ocurriendo en la frontera realmente es algo inhumano, porque cómo podemos agarrar gente, o sea, de verdad creemos que la gente que viene atraviesa el Darién, el Río Grande, y todo esto con 2 niños pequeños, realmente cree que vienen con malas intenciones, que gente que viene, o sea, realmente está comprobado que las personas que vienen de otros países, los inmigrantes, en menos de un año ya se levantaron. En cambio, dicen los facts, dicen los números, que los mayores criminales de este país nacieron aquí. Entonces,
totalmente
sí,
de acuerdo.
Sí.
Y los mayores traficantes y organizaciones de tráficos de personas, de adolescentes, de chicos y de drogas pesadas.
Yeah, she's totally
Totalmente
agree
de
with
acuerdo.
what you're saying.
Totalmente de acuerdo.
Y también es una crisis moral, porque en verdad no permitir que estas personas puedan ser socorridas y cuando llegan después de hacer todo ese recorrido, mandarlas de nuevo a su país es algo totalmente inhumano. Entonces es una crisis realmente, sí, es una crisis realmente moral y política, que donde ellos simplemente se quieren ver como más fuertes y no hablar del cartel de drogas. El cartel de drogas es algo que ella tiene pensado hacer, detener la guerra, la guerra contra las drogas, para legalizar algunas, para que eso baje, porque el problema con el cartel es que el mercado negro, the black market, ese es
como el de órganos y como el de todo.
Yeah, just like the organs, yeah, everything. So, todo ese es el mayor problema que habita en la parte inmigratoria. Entonces ella está segura que terminando la guerra contra las drogas, toda esa situación se va a ayudar mucho. Y con la gente que cree que ayudando a la gente a la frontera, eso se va a convertir en un problema. Nosotros tenemos National Security, nosotros tenemos la forma de defendernos y de proteger la frontera. No es que eso va a ser un problema. El problema nunca ha sido eso. El problema siempre ha estado dentro del país con los delincuentes que están aquí ya. Entonces, right. Thank you so much, Marianne. Okay, how much time we have? ¿Cuánto tiempo?
El tema, no, todavía vamos por 24 minutos,
Okay,
así que
perfect.
no hay problema.
So she wants to talk about mental health. What do you think about the mental health problem, depression, and everything in this country?
When we first began talking, I mentioned that underneath so many of these problems are root causes. Mental health crisis is in large part, again, a symptom, the root cause of which is economic injustice. I'll give you an example. If a woman, her child is born, and millions of years of evolution have gone into the mother knowing when it's not time yet to leave her baby. And we know that if the baby is held in the arms of one or both parents for a certain period of time, there will be fewer social problems and personal problems later on. But business demands otherwise, and so we do not have paid family leave universally in this country. Just like your wife is holding the baby. Santiago needs it, and your wife needs it. If your wife needed to leave Santiago before every cell in her body knows that she's supposed to, she will be depressed. The problem is not in her. The problem is in the society. If people have to work four jobs to make it, how would they not get depressed? If somebody is chronically, if you have 62% of Americans who live paycheck to paycheck, that means I miss one paycheck and my family might get kicked out of our apartment. I miss one paycheck and I might not be able to afford my insulin. How could I not be depressed? So a lot of what we call a mental health crisis. Now, are there other chemical issues? Certainly things such as schizophrenia and bipolar. Obviously, these things exist. I'm not minimizing that, and I never have. But there is a conversation in our society today talking about the mental health crisis as though it is disconnected from the deeper crisis of how hard it is for most Americans to simply live. You have 70% of Americans who now report living with chronic economic anxiety. I'm sorry, a therapist will not fix that. Governmental policy will fix that. And I know, because I've been the therapist, I've been the counselor, you know, I've been the spiritual therapist, I've been the person working up close with that person. But we can do all kinds of work together, including prayer. And prayer will certainly bring comfort to the heart, but I think prayer is also what's spurring us to say we need to do something about it and change these conditions that have so many people living in constant stress, anxiety, and trauma.
Wow. Sí.
Traducí porque eso es todo, o sea, le estoy entendiendo todo, mirá la atención que le presto.
Yeah, she's saying translate everything because I understood everything, but people has to know about this. Okay, so la pregunta fue, ¿qué piensas tú sobre la crisis mental que hay ahorita en Estados Unidos? Y ella siente que es lo mismo que ya se habló al principio, es realmente una crisis económica, es una crisis que, ¿cómo no va a estar la gente con depresión, con todo esto, si no saben cómo vivir con el dinero? Si 70% de las personas en Estados Unidos viven con financial distress, que están preocupadas por el dinero. La mayoría de la gente en este país vive paycheck to paycheck. Así que, ¿cómo no van a sentir estrés? Y eso no es algo que va a cambiar con terapia. Porque ella ha estado ahí, ella ha sido spiritual counselor, y ella ha intentado ayudar a gente así, pero ¿cómo vas a ayudar a alguien que no
Primero
puede?
darle de comer, mantenerla mejor económicamente y después el final.
Exactly, yeah. First feed the person and then she will get better. Yeah, so ese es el problema. El problema que ella ve es que realmente es un problema económico, y por eso es que ella está trabajando justamente ese problema
Y el otro tema que a mí me preocupa es el de las armas y el mercado negro y los chicos que terminan matando a compañeros en los colegios.
Okay, and that's the other issue that Latino communities are really worried about: school shootings, because it's kind of the same thing, that we don't have money, we have to take our kids to public schools, and so many parents are afraid to leave their kids in public schools because they're just afraid that they're getting a shooting, they get killed, or people with guns. So I can understand what you're saying, that it all comes to the same issue, but how would you approach to school shootings, for example?
Unfortunately, it's not just the parents who are feeling fear, the children are feeling fear. You think we have a mental health crisis now? Just wait 10 years. When you have a generation coming into maturity who, when they were in elementary school, prayed every morning that they would not get shot and killed at school. It's a horrifying situation. Again, we are being tyrannized by the institutional greed of the gun manufacturing industry and their lobbying arm called the NRA. So, unfortunately, look at something like Uvalde, Texas. Do you know when it came to the election after that tragedy, after that horror, they still voted for the people who do not want stronger gun safety laws? This is incomprehensible to me. The majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want more common sense gun safety laws, even gun owners. I do think this is a moment of possibility in this country, but the American people are going to have to take responsibility. We all must become more politically active on the level not only of local issues, but state and federal. We have to be very clear, who am I voting for as a congressman, and who am I voting for as a senator, and who am I voting for as a governor, as well as who am I voting for as a president. Because so many of these people who keep getting elected are still voting against an assault weapon ban. And that's the first thing we need to attend to. We also have to have federal red flag laws. We have to close many of the loopholes. We have to deal with high capacity magazines and so forth. There is much we can do, but we continue to elect people to Congress and to the Senate who are against the kind of gun safety legislation that is necessary. Secondly, and we all know this, it's no longer a question of is it guns or is it culture. It's clearly both. And we all have to take responsibility for creating a more non-violent society. There's so much, there is so much violence in everything from video games, gratuitous violence on even primetime television and movies, so much of which these young people are watching. Even Twitter is violence, it's emotionally violent. We all have to recognize the ways that we are a violent society and not be so shocked when that violence then erupts in places where we don't want it to happen.
Wow, increíble.
La historia es que en la mayoría de las campañas presidenciales el mayor aporte de dinero lo dio la Asociación Internacional del Rifle.
Yeah, yeah. She's saying that the best collaborators to the government are the gun industries. Like they're the ones who get more money.
When we had an assault weapon ban, there were for 10 years there were far fewer mass shootings, and then when it expired, they couldn't. Obama tried, Clinton tried. The Democratic presidents have been good on this, and this is an issue where it is the Republican Party that stands in the way.
Sí, es un problema, no solamente, es un problema que no es solamente del gobierno, sino es un problema cultural también, porque no solamente siguen en el poder las personas que no quieren poner más atención en lo que es las armas, porque no digamos que no se usen armas, pero ¿por qué assault rifles? ¿Verdad? ¿Por qué armas de alto calibre son permitidas en la calle? Entonces eso es algo que siguen siendo, estando en el poder las personas que permiten esto y siguen eligiendo las personas esto. Entonces también es una cuestión cultural, ¿no? Que siguen votando por esto. Y entonces ella siente que esto es algo que como sociedad tenemos que trabajar demasiado, y justo ella está trabajando ella va a ser uno de sus ministerios va a ser de la paz. Ella quiere crear en su Bill of Rights, ella habla de hacer un bill de la paz para enseñar a la gente en vez de hacer guerra, hacer los conflictos, resolverlos con guerra.
Yo la entiendo porque yo soy budista de la Soka Gakkai y abogamos por la paz.
Exactamente.
Y por otro tema el aborto.
Ok, sí, ya voy para allá. Entonces, es un problema, y además que la sociedad se sorprende demasiado por estos brotes de violencia que hay en las calles, pero no se dan cuenta que estamos poniéndole a nuestros niños juegos de video súper violentos, le estamos poniendo...
Promovemos
Sí,
eso.
sí, promovemos eso. Las películas de Hollywood vienen, le disparan a la gente en la cara, en los ojos y lo vemos. O sea, si la cultura sigue estando en el mismo sitio, no es muy difícil que tengamos resultados distintos. Obviamente el gobierno puede hacer mucho, pero hasta que nosotros como nuestra cultura no cambie en ese tipo de cosas, van a seguir ocurriendo.
Era lo que decía Einstein, ¿no? Si haces siempre lo mismo, esperando que cambie el final, estás loco.
Exactly. Sí, exacto. Yeah. Einstein used to say, if you keep doing the same things, you're gonna keep getting the same results. So, yeah, it has to be changed. Okay, so
Tema del aborto.
okay, so she wants to know about abortion. What are your thoughts about abortion?
I think of abortion as a moral issue. But there is a difference between issues of private morality and public morality. And I believe that abortion is an issue of private morality. I believe that it is for a woman, and often a man with her, to take the counsel of their own God, of their understanding, their own conscience, and make that decision. I do not believe the government has a right to make that decision for her. I trust the moral decision-making of the American woman. Whether you are on the right or the left, whether you are pro-choice or anti-choice, any reasonable person of conscience is horrified by the notion of a casual abortion. But I think we need to remember that the vast majority of our abortions are not casual. And I believe the only way to go here is to allow the woman herself to make that decision.
Great. Okay, so hay una diferencia, ella siente que hay una diferencia entre la moral, eso es un problema moral, obviamente, es un problema, entonces ella siente que es moral individual y moral colectiva. Entonces, y ella siente que esto es un tema que tiene que ser tratado como una moral personal, porque al final es la decisión de la persona. Ella confía en la mujer americana, ella confía en la mujer de aquí. Obviamente cualquier persona se siente horrorizada por lo que puede ser convertirse en un aborto, pero al final cada quien
uno no sabe cuál es la historia personal de cada uno.
Y volvemos a los mismos problemas, los problemas
Totalmente.
económicos, todo viene de ahí, de lo que ella viene diciendo, que siempre hayan estos problemas, vamos a volver a lo mismo. La gente normalmente no quiere tener un niño, no por cualquier cosa, sino porque no hay dinero. ¿Cómo voy a mantener ese niño? Si hubiese dinero, probablemente todo eso, todas las decisiones cambiarían. Entonces, al final es un problema, ella lo considera un problema personal de la moral personal.
Muy bien. No tengo más nada que preguntar. Se me acabó el repertorio.
I
algo
do have
así.
questions. Do we have time for one more? ¿Sí? Una
No,
más.
sí,
¿Tenemos tiempo para una
estamos
más?
por 38 minutos.
Okay, so we can have two more questions. Okay, this Jessie Ellen wrote this question. As a mother, and knowing many of our listeners are parents, what decisions would you make as presidents to ensure the protection and well-being of our children in areas like education, health, and their future? And most importantly, well, we already touched the school shootings.
I want to establish a Department of Children and Youth. The only way we will have the country we want in 20 years is if we give far more attention to children 10 years old and younger today. We now know things about early childhood that we didn't even know 15 years ago. We know about neuroplasticity in the brain. We know that 90% of a child's brain is developed in those first 5 years, much even in the first 1 year. We have babies who are hungry in this country. There should not be one hungry child in America, and it will be my top priority. We have the highest poverty rate, including the highest child poverty rate of any advanced democracy. Hungry children cannot learn. Not only is it an issue of their being hungry, but even when they eat, too many American children are eating bad food, processed foods, foods filled with carcinogens that would not be allowed in any other advanced democracy. If you have a child who is hungry, a child who is eating only processed food, a child who is looking at their tablet, addicted already at the age of 5, as opposed to having meaningful contact with parents and loved ones, you've got a fire that is already brewing, and you can't wait later to just try to control the symptoms. So we have to start attending to our children now. Children are the largest, in my mind, the biggest collateral damage created by what has become a heartless economic system that dominates our government. Children are not old enough to work, so they don't have any financial leverage. They're not old enough to vote, so they're not a constituency, and their needs are routinely neglected. And that's why the parents of America need to stand up as the advocates for our children. This is an aspect of the way Washington functions that is now the status quo that will not disrupt itself. I want to convene the greatest minds in America, whether it has to do with the brain, whether it has to do with education, whether it has to do with childcare, and of course we need subsidized childcare in this country like in every other advanced democracy. And I want to have I want to convene a group. I want to be personally involved. I want to establish a department. And one thing that my administration would be is deeply child-centric.
Great. Okay. Ella quiere crear un departamento para la juventud y la niñez. Eso es uno de sus temas principales en su presidencia, porque ya está demostrado, hace 15 años no sabemos estas cosas, pero está demostrado que los primeros 5 años de un niño son los años más importantes de donde se desarrolla el cerebro y sobre todo el primer año. Entonces, ya sabiendo estas cosas, si ponemos atención a esto, podemos tener una sociedad totalmente distinta. En 10 años, ya tenemos una sociedad distinta, solamente por aplicar esto. Entonces ella quiere quiere hacer un cambio en el sistema económico, obviamente. Quiere dar maternity leave, o sea, quiere ayudar con todo eso de que las madres puedan estar más tiempo con sus hijos para hacer el bonding, la conexión con su bebé, en vez de irse a tener que trabajar en 30 días, como la ley de aquí. Entonces, ella quiere establecer ese tiempo, quiere establecer un mejor tiempo para eso, para educación, para que los niños tengan free college, universidad gratuita, educación gratuita, para que no esté ese estrés, y además que crezcan con esa fortaleza
que le da tener a los padres al lado.
Exactamente, tener a sus padres al lado. So, ella está atacando el problema desde la raíz, en vez de hacerlo, atacar el problema, porque como dice ella, si agarras a un niño que está addicted to the tablet at 5 years old, que ya está adicto, ya no hay nada que hacer, ahí hay que ir al problema desde la raíz. Entonces eso es lo que ella tiene pensado para abrir el departamento de juventud y de niñez.
Va a ser, decirle, una tarea muy difícil, porque creo que va a haber muchos hombres que se van a oponer a todo esto.
She says that it's going to be hard because there's going to be a lot of men that's going to oppose to this these laws, but yes, not this man. So last question. What can people do to to do all these things that you're saying? How can they support all these things that you have in mind, and where can they find more information about you, and what can they do to change this country right now? If they believe what you're saying, what they should do.
If people agree with the things that I've said, what they can do is to help me win the Nevada primary. And it is in not that much more than 2 months from now. If people will go to my website at Marianne2024.com and sign up as volunteers. The website is already in Spanish. We are in the process of making sure that same en español button will be on the phone, but if they cannot find it on the phone, to please go to their computer and know that it will be on the phone soon. You and I are working on developing our social media more in Spanish, and Nevada is a very powerful and important state in the primary process because you are an early primary. The primary will be in early February, and I need help. I need help. If anyone finds this aligned with your own heart, please send it to your friends. Call your friends. Sign up to volunteer. And be part of our efforts. We need to do a lot to exert the necessary power over the next 2 months, but it's possible, and it's all in the hands of the people of Nevada.
Great. Okay. So, como sabemos, el estado de Nevada es uno de los más importantes en las primarias porque es uno de los primeros estados. Si se alinean con el mensaje de Marianne, si se alinean con su mensaje, les gusta esto, todos podemos ver claramente que esto que ella piensa y que ella trae es totalmente revolucionario. Totalmente. So, necesitamos ayuda, necesitamos que salga la gente
a votar.
Sí, que salga la gente a votar, que voten, que hablen con sus amigos, con sus familiares, spread the message, díganlo, mira, conocí a esta persona, escuché a esta candidata, ¿qué te parece? Vayan a la website, infórmense más, hay muchísima información que no se pudo hablar aquí hoy porque no tenemos el tiempo, pero hay muchísima información en la website para informarse sobre las cosas que ella está sugiriendo. Y
decirle que está invitada cordialmente a venir las veces que lo necesites o quiera.
Okay, sí.
Vos traducís.
Sí, yes. Okay, so es muy importante, recordemos, Nevada es uno de los primeros estados, y si en las votaciones Marianne gana Nevada, va a ser un ejemplo para todos los Estados Unidos para decir, who is this? ¿Entienden? ¿Quién es esta persona? Ok, so, es demasiado importante este estado, así que prácticamente está en nuestras manos, en Las Vegas, en Nevada, de apoyar a Marianne si se alinea con este mensaje. She's saying that you got her vote, and
thank you.
and that she's gonna spread this message, and she's gonna be talking about you, and and whenever you want to come back, you can come back.
Thank you.
This is your house.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and thank you so much, Marianne, for coming here.
Thank you. It was an honor.
Yeah, this is a community radio, very close to the people here in Vegas. So I think it's a real important place for roots.
Realmente decirle agradecidísima que todo lo que pueda hacer de mi parte esta radio, más mis vinculaciones, para ayudar a su campaña, desde ya que no lo tiene ni que dudar,
Awesome.
Porque esta propuesta que ella está dando es la primera propuesta impecable y coherente que en los 20 años que estoy aquí he escuchado. Y aparte es una mujer. ¿Cómo no voy a votar a una mujer?
So she's saying this is the first proposal, coherent proposal and impeccable proposal that she's ever heard from a politician in her over 20 years living here. So for sure she has all the contacts in the world, I know this, and she's going to be talking to everyone to support you and help you.
Thank you very, very much.
El pastor Isaac Humana dice, ya lo compartí en un montón de páginas incluso a la gente que él ayuda también. Él ayuda para una de las favelas más importantes de Río de Janeiro, haciendo donación de cosas. La ha compartido hasta con gente de Brasil.
Okay, so a pastor that Isaac
Es un
Zumana,
pastor de aquí de Las Vegas.
Yeah, from Vegas. He already shared all your message and all this
Thank you.
because he moves
toda
a
mi
lot
gente,
of people here.
O sea, esto va a ser viral, ¿eh? Esta nota va a ser viral, la vamos a pegar en todos lados. Y lo importante es para la gente que no sabe, que no habla inglés, es hacer el subtitulado para que todo el mundo sepa de esta propuesta que es tan importante.
Exacto.
Se nos está acabando el tiempo. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so
Thank you
much.
so much. Decirle qué cosita más quisiera decir para los jóvenes, para estimular a los jóvenes que salen a lo mejor del high school y no saben qué hacer.
Is there anything else that you want to say to the youth? To
young people. You know, I understand why so many young people in America today feel somewhat hopeless and desperate. And I think it's important that all of us join in knowing that we, the people, can change things. We must have that revolution at the ballot box. But if we do get involved in this primary season, in these next 2 months, we can make this happen. And please hold on, change is coming.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Nos está viendo Víctor Manuel Vanegas desde Las Vegas. Dice saludos desde Fresnillos y un abrazo muy grande a los invitados.
Awesome. Yeah. A lot of people in the chat saying that they love what they're
Thank
hearing.
you.
So yes.
Bueno,
Víctor Vanegas.
Thank
Yes.
you so much. Thank you.
Yes, of course.
y así nos despedimos hasta el próximo programa de Te Escucho Las Vegas con la doctora Mónica Roca por esta su radio por internet, Magiclatinosvegas.org, la otra cara de Sin City, desde Las Vegas, Nevada, para el mundo. Espérate que nos sacamos la foto, por favor.